Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover, all for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter 5000 at checkout. That's harrys.com, code 5000. Enjoy.
This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. As we are fully embedded now into 2020, the NBA season is picking up. And lo and behold, the Western Conference is finally shaking up to be an interesting conference to pay attention to as we start marking a little bit closer to NBA All-Star Weekend. And with that being said, you know I got to roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. I know that we were so fixated on the hype of the Eastern Conference. Is it okay that we can refocus our attention back to the West now?
Well, for us, absolutely. I think there are some people who think the attention should have never left, but we're paying attention. And the West has not been amazing to start the year, but now they're starting to get the proverbial act together.
Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover, all for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter 5000 at checkout. That's harrys.com, code 5000. Enjoy.
So great topics of conversation, discuss the two teams that we'll highlight in particular. I'll let you do those honors here in a little bit. But as always, salute to all the fans and listeners of NBA Baseline. Very excited about this week's show. Trudging along here, man, in 2020, bro.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what it kind of felt like when we were talking about teams that are not in the first or second seed, respectively, in the Western Conference, that the rest of everyone else, the other 14 teams, essentially, were just trudging along. But recently now, we have seen the growth spurt. You know what I'm saying? They started growing some of them things down beneath the waistline and actually have stepped up their game and have made the Western Conference a viable conference once more to the idea that we've been saying, how no matter what's happening in the East, that we still think that the best really would probably be coming out of the West. And now we're starting to see these teams line themselves up. But there are two teams in particular that my man Shaw and I want to kind of dig our heels into. And we've been paying attention to them very closely. And that's the teams of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Memphis Grizzlies. If you people have not been watching, these guys, while they are at the lower part of the Western Conference seedings right now, they have marketably been an improved basketball team. We'll get into that why part of it. But I think the bigger question can also be is it really like a lot of smoke and mirrors? Is it really that the Oklahoma City Thunder are just that good, and the Memphis Grizzlies are getting that good? Or is it really that the teams that we expected to be replacing them as far as being in the Western Conference seeding goes right now, playoff seeding, are they really just that bad? I think that we would like to make the former argument for you guys. So definitely stick around and catch us as we get into that. And as always, man, we appreciate you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. You know where to find us. Whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, be sure to look for the Baseline NBA podcast. Add us to your playlist. Kick back, relax, allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. All right. You know how we do. You know how we roll. You're not new to this rodeo. Let's get it started with the breakdown. Time to break it down.
Break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Kyle Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And our topic for the breakdown. With the Western Conference feeling like it's been weaker than expected, there have been two teams who have really kind of changed the focus of how we really should be grading the conference altogether. Now, while teams like the Houston Rockets, the Utah Jazz have definitely stepped their game up, the Denver Nuggets have played improved basketball, albeit though the other night, man, they stunk up the joint, with a very unimpressive performance at home. We can definitely say now teams are starting to look like the dominant teams that are going to round out the seedings 1 through 6 at least in the Western Conference moving forward. And this is before we even get to, All-Star Weekend. But I think it's expected because these are primarily the same teams that have been competing in the Western Conference playoffs for the last couple of years. But what I think a lot of people are not recognizing is that one of these two teams that we're going to be talking about really, and I know with one of us, between myself and Shaw, didn't feel like they had any chance whatsoever of being this good a basketball team. And no matter what was going to take place, it could possibly mean that a guy like Chris Paul, a Hall of Fame guard, a guy who is used to taking teams from being mediocre and putting them on the precipice of being playoff contending or making late runs in the playoffs. I don't even think he expected him to have this team playing at such a high level and being this competitive already in his first season with the Oklahoma City Thunder and with Billy Donovan. And then you got another team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who we'll get into in a little bit. But Shaw, I gotta ask you this, because you were vehement in your belief that the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to be the worst team out of the Northwest Division. And I don't know, maybe Chris Paul really was listening to our show and he's on some, would you like your humble pie now? Because even I didn't expect him to be this good, but I don't think anyone expected him to be 7 seed in the Western Conference good already. That was not a plausible equation to what we were trying to come up with these guys.
Well, I think a lot of this starts from the outset of what you said when it comes to the Western Conference. Even a lot of teams in the West are not as good as we would have thought they were going to be. And now we're starting to see some people make their proverbial comebacks, but that has allowed OKC, a team that ironically doesn't have a lot of history and chemistry together. They've kind of gelled a lot quicker than they probably should have for all intents and purposes. And while Chris Paul is the catalyst for a lot of what's going on there, SGA, GIlgeous-Alexander doing a great job, Gallinari staying healthy for the most part, playing great basketball. Billy Donovan has just found a way to get these guys to really contribute and understand their roles and play at a level right now where they are competing, and they are really a problem here in the Western Conference. And I don't think that this is a team, and we'll have to get into it maybe a little bit further down the line here, but all the conversations about breaking it up and selling off the assets, I don't know where that stands right now. And there might be victims of their own circumstances, even success, where because the contract of Chris Paul is so heavy and so problematic for some that they weren't getting a lot of offers and a lot of takers on his contract. The Miamis, the Minnesotas, et cetera, et cetera. And even with some of those teams, how they started, it really kind of put them off from trying to go after CP3. Now you're having a level of success with this team, and winners of 7 out of their last 10. 5-6 games over 500 right now. And sitting pretty comfortably in the 7th seed in the Western Conference. And sure, we have a long way to go, but this OKC Thunder team has really surprised me, and I think many in the Western Conference.
They surprise me, but they don't surprise me, I think, to such a degree that many other people might have felt, Shaw. So you remember when we were talking about this, when we were giving our previews for the division, and the thing that I said, and I still buy into this, is that Chris Paul is the type of player that he refuses to be a part of a team that will not play up to the level that he expects himself to play at. Now, Chris Paul is certainly no spring chicken. We understand that. But his competitive nature is not just within him. And we've said this before, man. He's a bulldog on the basketball court. But just like any other type of aggressive animal, once other animals in the kennel see how the lead dog operates, they all want to act like that, even if that's not in their nature. They know that they have to be of a certain level to play on that level. And Chris Paul has just always been that type of guy. Now, he's played next to guys where, because of his nature, it has allowed us to, I guess in a way, give excuse for what the other players don't exemplify, like the dynamic of when Chris Paul played with James Harden when they were with the Houston Rockets. They had something there, and then we thought that maybe Chris Paul would rub off on James Harden and his demeanor and the way that he needs to take over and be. He needed to be what Chris Paul wished he was offensively in his heyday, right? And we only saw it to get to a certain point. I think now that we are looking at this team, the GIlgeous-Alexanders, the Dennis Schroeders, these are the guys that are really feeding off of why Chris Paul has always been that kind of player for any team that he's been on. I think we see it more with these younger guys than we've seen with the veteran guys that have already had a superstar presence and kind of already had a persona built within themselves. Chris Paul is really changing the way that we look at the backcourt that the Oklahoma City Thunder is rolling out on a nightly basis. And it's not because we're saying they're scoring a ton of points or anything like that. It's because of the way that they're playing. And even in certain critical situations, it's the aggressiveness by which they're playing that I think has helped elevate the teams. Now we validate guys like Steven Adams being on this roster. We validate guys like Danilo Gallinari shooting the basketball the way that they do, because the backcourt play is dynamically so different than what we've seen in recent years with OKC. And I think the imprint that Chris Paul has on those two young guys is what's spearheading them to get games that they probably would not be able to win, because we always felt the uncertainty of this team was lost the moment that Sam Presti gave up Russell Westbrook.
A lot of what they're doing, like you said, is based on Donovan and Chris Paul and their overall leadership on the floor. Because when you look at their record right now, and then you look at kind of some of the regular counting stats, they're in the middle of the pack for everything. Offense and defense, 14th and 15th respectively, or whatever it is. And hey, they're sitting here 7th. But again, this team, when you look at the roster, yes, Chris Paul, you probably even know GIlgeous-Alexander, and you probably know Steven Adams and Gallo, but the rest of it is sometimes it's guys who are just, hey, we're happy to be here. You're getting production out of guys like Terrence Ferguson and Abdel Nader, even Muscala and Hamidou Diallo, former dunk contest champion, if you will. All those guys play their roles spectacularly right now in Donovan's system. And it's not that they're putting up amazing stats. It's the fact that they just understand what they need to do. And a guy who I have dogged on our podcast for years and years and years and years has finally matured, and that's Dennis Schroeder. And right now, he's at a point where he is a legitimate 6th Man of the Year candidate and playing immense basketball for this Thunder team, allowing them to go with the 3-guard rotation with Paul Schroeder and GIlgeous-Alexander at the same time. Schroeder has just been so good for them coming off the bench. And again, I don't know if this team is going to sell off any of their assets this year. They may just want to see how this goes and see if this is something that they can actually build around, especially with the plethora of picks that they have. This team has 10 draft picks over the next 6 years, 10 first-round draft picks. That's not even counting second rounders. Just 10 first-round draft picks over the next 6 years. The Thunder team is in very, very good position. And hey, man, Sam Presti See, maybe he didn't mean to do it this way, but he somehow caught lightning in a bottle, and I'll be interested to see how they move forward through the rest of the season.
Well, so let's talk about that, Shaw. Let's talk about what they need per se, and you brought it really to the forefront. If you are the Oklahoma City Thunder, do you really consider moving assets, or do you consider building upon the current assets that you have? So I want to first ask you this question. You look at how this roster is currently constructed, okay? Do you think that they are built to be a team that could be dangerous in the first round matchup of anyone that they would be up against if the playoffs were to start today? Would they be a dangerous first round matchup?
Yeah, I think they are. For anybody, they're not going to be an easy out. While I don't think they can beat a Lakers or a Clippers team, I think they could they could steal one or two maybe in one of those series. But I think they could be a huge problem for Denver or Utah or somebody like that, maybe even a Houston. Again, you talked about what they just did to Houston recently. I think they have that confidence where they could potentially win those series and feel like nothing would be wrong with that. And to your point in general, I feel like this is a team that may just stick through it this year simply because of the contracts that are currently in place, right? Gallo is expiring, and yes, he has value, so you could probably flip and get maybe a 12th and 13th, first round draft pick for the next 6 years if you wanted to potentially. But I think with Gallo coming off the books, Roberson coming off the books, et cetera, guys like that, even though he signed him to a 1-year deal, maybe you just give your fans this 1 year of a feel-good story. And as you alluded to, see what the hell happens. Throw shit to the wall, if you will, and see what happens if you get into the playoffs and maybe you can get as a 7th seed, or maybe you can sneak up to 6, and catch Dallas or whatever, and have that 3-6 matchup with somebody who you could potentially really, really beat. And I think for the fan base that has seen, Harden, Durant, Westbrook, all those guys leave, this might be the feel-good story because you still have plenty of picks to restock your roster with moving forward, and you can make other assets and you can be nimble. And we know Presti's not afraid to trade. So I think this is a situation where they may ride this thing out, man, and see where it takes them.
A lot of great points. For me, I think what really sticks out here is if you are the Oklahoma City Thunder fan base, I'm going to take it from their perspective first, and then I'll take a look at it. I'll give it to you internally. But if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder fan base, you have to be appreciative of the fact that you have been in the conversation of the playoff picture essentially for most of the decade, right? I mean, from 2010 to 2019, the Oklahoma City Thunder has always been relevant when it comes to participating in the NBA playoffs, right? So there's another team that used to do this, and that was the Memphis Grizzlies. So it's ironic that the two teams that we are focusing our attention on, that we thought that their rebuild process would probably be 3-4 years down the road, that there is an accelerated timetable, so to speak, about their ability to still be relevant in these conversations of competing. I think you have to be realistic. We can't compare the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Los Angeles Lakers, to your point, or maybe even to the Houston Rockets, teams that have had a championship already in their mantle. If you are a franchise and a small market type franchise like the Oklahoma City Thunder, you have to appreciate that you are in a window where success has been stable and has been consistent. And even when you have had moments where you're basically trying to rip the floorboard, you know what I'm saying? You rip the ground underneath you. You still have quality pieces that will allow you to move forward as a franchise. So I think if you're an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, you have to appreciate that even if Sam Presti, and to your point, maybe there was a little luck involved, but there's still strategically something about why Presti did what he did and kept the players that he kept. If you are the Oklahoma City Thunder, you have to appreciate that you have a competitive basketball team, right? and that this team can actually do some things that can give you a reason to keep coming to that arena on a night in, night out basis, right? Now, if you are the management, where you have to be wary of is that just because your intent at the beginning of the season was that you're going to keep Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari and Steven Adams around just long enough to boost their value and then just go off on a firing sale, you have to still think about, even if your best intentions with the plethora of picks that you have, is that you don't give away everything to the point where you rob people of seeing the progression of this team still being viable and still being good. Like, there's nothing wrong with the team being 500 and maybe giving away one or two of the pieces, but knowing that the pieces that you're truly keeping are the foundational pieces that have made your young players better, and that whoever you're bringing from draft and trades or whatever the case may be is incrementally making the team better. Because we've seen this already the last couple of years, Shaw. When the firing sale happens, when it's all said and done and the smoke clears, some of these teams still have no idea what they've done and what they're trying to do. Like the Chicago Bulls, right? Who else? Like the Sacramento Kings. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no clear, definitive way, the New York Knicks, no clear, definitive way of us being able to tell where the rebuild was supposed to start and where the selling and the fire sale was supposed to begin or end. And so that, to me, is where I think Oklahoma has to really be careful, because this team, they're still going to need to do something by the trade deadline. There's no question. You cannot get by with Danilo. You can't trust him. He's not healthy. I don't know what you really do with Steven Adams, even though he's having a great season playing with Chris Paul. But if Chris Paul is not long-term, I don't know where the combination of Schroeder and GIlgeous-Alexander with Adams is going to make this basketball team better and competitively better moving forward. So you may have to look at that. But there are definitely pieces that if you're thinking about moving them, you don't have to completely move them with nothing that you're gaining for the immediate impact that this team can have if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Well, again, I think, looking at their salary situation, with Paul still owed whatever it is, $85 million over the next 2 years. I think it's interesting if you do decide to keep him. I was listening to, a different podcast, on air. Again, I listen to so much. Sometimes I didn't remember who says what, but whoever it was, they made a very good point. And, I'm going to reiterate it and paraphrase to the best of my abilities that maybe this is the best that there is for Chris Paul. Age 34, on a team that he can leave his imprint on. They're scrappy, and he can teach young guys because he still has a little bit left to give. But can he be a championship level point guard at this situation? I don't know that we're ever going to find out. And I'm not trying to make it seem, doomish and gloomish for him here, but maybe this is a perfect situation on a team, on a little engine that could, if you will, and that probably shouldn't. But because of his obstinance and the way he just carries himself in every way, he'll tell F you to anybody who doubts him. I think this is like a great situation. And I agree with those gentlemen on that podcast who says this. And I was like, yeah, it does make some sense. Maybe he should be here for the duration or whatever the case would be. And the auxiliary parts are the things that maybe change around him outside of SGA. Now, to your point, though, and maybe even to an earlier conversation, when it came to this team, I didn't think he or Gallo would be healthy or even want to be in the situation to begin with. And so far they have been. And I think obviously them being on the floor is what is allowing them to accumulate some wins here. But this team is not necessarily built for a long-term run without either one of those two guys, even with as good as Schroeder has been playing. So to your point, the only assets they have are the assets that are making them good. And they're not trading SGA. I think everybody else they'd have a conversation on, but I don't know if they're willing to have that conversation this season. So again, we'll see how it goes throughout the rest of the year and see what they decide to do from there. But no one's knocking down their door asking for Ferguson or Baisley or Nerlens Noel or anybody like that. Even Noel is only still 25 years old. But I think, if you take some of those guys and maybe you get rid of some of those picks because you also can't have 10 picks in the next 6 years. You can't utilize them all. That can give Presti the leverage he needs to make some other moves to make this team and this roster better and a lot sooner than we thought they were probably going to be.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Topic of the breakdown as we are digging into what is making the Thunder roll. So I want to add something to this point, Shaw. The other thing that I think people need to really pay attention to, and it's very simple, like it's simplified in this context, but I think that we have to be cognizant of this when we have these conversations about the Thunder or teams like the Thunder. Let's remember, this team, first of all, the reason why the Oklahoma City Thunder is successful right now is they have a winning record in their own conference, essentially supposed to be the toughest of the two conferences. As we're recording this podcast, they have a 15-12 record in the Western Conference, right? That's better than the Portland Trailblazers, right, who are below 500 in their own conference, right? And it's in part why we're saying, realistically, we don't know if the Portland Trailblazers, even if they eventually make the run that they should be making, that they will make up the significant ground that I think has been lost given where their struggles have been. So in that essence, the Oklahoma City Thunder is taking care of business to position themselves the way that they are. But I think people should not get completely caught up in this moment of their success, because just like anything else, this is, you play one team and then you play another team. You don't play the same basketball team 2-3 times over consecutively like you would in the playoffs, which is part of the reason why I was making the point, Sean, in the very beginning about how we should take this Oklahoma City Thunder team. Yes, for a regular season, this team looks like they are built to show you how incrementally better some of their players and collectively as a team they can be and how competitive they can be. I don't, however, trust them in a 7-game series against a team that has already been in the playoffs or has been coached to compete in the playoffs. So if you play the Utah Jazz, you play the Houston Rockets, you play the Los Angeles Clippers, you play the LA Lakers, yes, they may get a game or two, and that might give you the warm fuzzies if you're Oklahoma City, but let's not be naive. Let's not think that this team is built to run 7 games against a LeBron James-led basketball team, a Harden-led basketball team, a Kawhi Leonard-led basketball team, or even a basketball team led by Spider, right? Like, they're not built like that just yet. I'm not confident that they're built like that. And you essentially could be running the risk of a guy like Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari suffering injuries because those teams are going to work the Oklahoma City Thunder. Right. So I don't know. So the reason why I brought all of that up, Shaw, is that I just want to make sure that people are setting their expectations properly about how they should really feel about this Oklahoma City Thunder team, because they can get better. And I think if you are Sam Presti, this isn't about you trying to per se replace the team unless you're really going for it. You're going to replace them with significantly better players as much as you are really filling out the depth of this basketball team to alleviate the burden you're going to put on a Chris Paul, the burden that you're going to put on a Danilo Gallinari. If you get Andre Roberson at some particular point, if he ever comes back, or if he even plays with what you can get with a guy, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are certain players that you can immediately fill in right now that could be better if the intent is that you are trying to build out for the future. But there's certainly times where even right now you can add players onto this roster that they can be even more competitive than what they already are, that we could be built to take on these teams if it has to go in a 7-game, it has to go the route of going 7 games. Because some of these, the way that this team is built right now, they may give you 1 or 2. That means they're out in 5. Right? Maybe out in 6, but they're not built to go 7.
Well, that's tough, So I mean, if I'm understanding you, put it this way, the quick answer is: do you think the OKC Thunder should be buyers this season? Should they be looking to improve this roster and add to what they have this season, going for this whatever this playoff run may potentially be?
Me personally, I say yes. I would like to see them do that, but you brought up a good point. There's not a whole lot that's out there. And I think you have to be really have to dig deep, not just on the analytics. I think you have to dig deep in what you're looking at with this roster to see where is it that I'm trying to improve without compromising what really is making this team go.
Well, I only challenge you in this way where I don't know when it comes to, let's say, Gallinari specifically. you're going to be trying to get somebody at the max of salary, but you're not going to get an established good player for Gallinari right now. So you're probably going to get a young guy who needs to figure out himself and maybe develop. Or they were going to be trying to move Gallinari for a project type player and another pick of some sort. So to get better, I don't know the pieces that they have or even the assets that they have to do that makes sense that they could do that this year. Because of what the market is, even in terms of potentially trade availability, and then just what you can accept as an acceptable return for the players that you're sending out. Like for in some instances, maybe if you're trading Shai Gilgeous and one of your picks, then you can get an upgrade for a more established person or something like that. But Gallo, even Adams to some degree, they're not going to yield the type of player that's going to make OKC immediately better right now. It would be for another young player that they're going to be trying to build around, or again, future picks again. And that would be the only issue that I see with your argument in that. And while I think we're in agreement in terms of thinking that they should maybe just go for it, my intent is that they should go for with what they have, and the chips fall where they may. I don't think there's a move out there that can get them to a championship level right now this season, and not with their current even roster in place. But I do feel like this is a team, like as you alluded to a little bit earlier, that can be a problem moving forward. Two great things about this Oklahoma City Thunder team is that they don't really turn the ball over and they don't foul. And that keeps them in basketball games. So when you look at their offensive and defensive rating, you see it's in the middle of the pack. Those small things, where you're not fouling and putting a bunch of guys on the free throw line on a regular basis and not turning it over, that's extra possessions for you. And that's how this team is winning basketball games. You know what I mean? They're just doing things the smart incremental way, with a roster that has come together very, very quickly. Shai Gilgeous has taken to Chris Paul in a way that many people maybe didn't think it was going to happen. He cheers and he roots for that guy, and vice versa. So I think we're going to see this kind of be a love affair for the rest of the season.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we are heavily in our breakdown segment talking about two teams who've made a turnaround. Is the turnaround really quick, or is the turnaround incrementally allowing us to appreciate when organizations see that they've got players on the come up? So let's talk about that other team, Shaw, as we kind of went headstrong when we talked about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's talk about the team that's rolling up right behind them, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies. This was a basketball team completely on an overhaul. A lot of the burden was on the shoulders of them picking Ja Morant as their third pick in the draft. This is a basketball team, Shaw, that, has surprisingly stepped up and has improved over the last couple of weeks. And, we had that conversation about who you got. Right. And it was a great conversation because we actually had some of our listeners kind of give their take as well, too, about, you people were with Team Shai like yourself, and me, I was with Team Ja. And this is what we're seeing from this basketball team is exactly why I believe that if you were asking me to build a team right now, that this is who I would want to have in the immediate because of what I'm seeing from Ja Morant. He's just an instant spark plug to this team. He, I think, gives people the belief that it's not that they don't want to remember, they don't want to forget about grit and grind. I think they appreciate what the grit and grind era really has given them, but they don't want to be, like that old grandpa sitting on the rocking chair, reminiscing about how things were good, how the good things were and how they used to be. They want to be a part of that youth movement, right? They want to be the ones that are rolling with their grandchildren out on the front lawn, playing whatever the new game is in this new modern era. And I think Ja Morant is the link that bridge for the Memphis Grizzlies to move from grit and grind to hustle and muscle. Like this team doesn't look like what they reflected when they had Gasol and they had Randolph. And to me, that is what I was looking at when we're talking about putting a new player and building a roster around a guy. He's helping us see that right now with the improved offensive play and the improved hustle and desire that we're getting from the Memphis Grizzlies, which is why they're only 5 games under 500, but right now sitting in the 8th seed as we record this podcast.
Yeah, as we record, winners are 4 straight. They're going to be playing here in a little bit, so we'll see if that's 5 straight or whatever it ends up being. And they could very easily be the 8th seed or fall somewhere between 11 and 12, as everyone is nipping at their heels. But I think this recent streak kind of shows where the youth movement seems to be coming together a little bit. And John Morant is he's an exceptional talent. And I think the biggest part of what's happening with him right now is that he's playing more consistently. Jaren Jackson's playing a little bit more consistently. They're getting production out of Dylan Brooks as well, too. And I don't know how many GMs, but I know there should be a lot of them kicking themselves for passing on Brandon Clark and letting them slip, down into the late 20s where Memphis selected him. Like, that's criminal. So that guy is a baller, and I think he's going to make a lot of general managers sad right now. The fact that he's even averaging more rebounds coming off the bench than Jaren Jackson is, shows me all I need to know about this kid and his level of hustle and his level, even his hustle and muscle, as you alluded to here. Go here and coin your phrase. I think this Memphis team is just coming together at the right time. While I'm not necessarily convinced that they're going to be a playoff team or whatever the case may be, and they could very well sell off assets. And there's one thing we do got to discuss, and might as well get into it right now. One, Jay Crowder is a guy that people are going to have interest in, but I think his veteran leadership has also helped stabilize the ship a little bit. But they still have Andre Iguodala in their back pocket, waiting to move him here in the next month or two as well too. So even potentially more assets could be coming to this team to make them better moving into the future.
So let me highlight that point about Andre Iguodala. I want to come from a different place with my perspective on what's going on with Memphis and with Iguodala. If I'm the Memphis Grizzlies, I would be very careful. If I'm Wexler, I'd be very, very careful on how I'm continuing to approach this scenario in this situation. Look, players don't like being denied the opportunity to do their thing. Not that Andre Iguodala has any reason to complain. He's still getting paid. But the perception of how they negotiate, how they transactionally handle this situation with Andre Iguodala can bite them, in the behind moving forward. If they do not handle this and make sure that they take care of this in a way that as an organization sheds them still in a decent light. Like right now, you're riding off of the success that from a player development and drafting perspective, you guys are on the right path. But if you're talking about building a team and you're not going to completely do it through the draft and through the players that you already have had on this roster, if you're saying that at some point you are going to you want to bring free agents to come and play for this team, you better make sure that you're balancing how you handle the guys that are currently on the roster and the guys that you're still negotiating buyouts with. Because if you don't handle a guy like Andre Iguodala, who is in the player's ear, who has the respect of a lot of guys on contract, off contract, with Chris Paul, Players Union, with former champions, right? Like if you don't have that level of respect for a guy like him, regardless of whether or not it's supposed to mean anything for this team, it still can look badly when other free agents may want to look at your team and see how you handle a guy like Andre Iguodala, who's been nothing but class personified for the some umpteen years he's been playing in the league, to then handle his situation in that kind of manner. I'm just saying, Shaw, and I'll let you weigh in on why I'm bringing this up. The Memphis Grizzlies have a good thing going. It would really suck that things go awry when you're trying to put together a team to quickly be on that rebuild process. And it's at the expense that you can only get young players and, naive players and players that don't have anything to look forward to except for maybe go to a destination like Memphis. The reason why most of these free agents are saying to themselves, wow, I would love to go to Memphis, man, but after I see how they handle Iguodala and his situation, I don't know if I want to be down with all of that craziness.
Well, I'm going to double down here on your point for a variety of reasons, and one of them is pretty technical in some aspect, right? So Memphis is in a situation where they're going to have a lot of money to spend next summer, but they're not traditionally an exciting free agent destination. Now you're hoping the fanfare of Ja will entice some other guys to want to come there, because this isn't a team where, if they don't make the playoffs, all right, well, they're guaranteed to get their picks. Well, their pick is top 6 protected, where they'll keep it, but it will convey to Boston if it's outside of the top 6. And the way they're playing right now, well, they wouldn't have a top 6 selection, right? So that pick is gone. Then they have another pick that is supposed to convey to Utah. Basically Utah keeps its pick if it's between 1 and 7, or if it's 15 to 30. So if Utah makes the playoffs, well, they don't get the pick. And it doesn't look like Utah's going to make the playoffs or be crappy enough where they're going to be in the lottery. So they would only get that pick if it's between 8 and 14. Very unique structuring, I think, from Dennis Lindsey out there in Utah. So right now, Memphis doesn't have any draft picks coming up that would actually convey to them as we record today. So it stands to reason that they need to do everything right. Jaren Jackson, all those guys need to continue to mesh. And the Iguodala situation, which is one of the main reasons I think they are holding on, is because they are trying to force another asset out of it, because they do realize what their situation is, coming up in this year's draft. So I don't know if they can get a 2020 first round pick for Iguodala. That might be far fetched in some aspect, but they want to try to accumulate as many assets as they can, because they know what 2020 is for them. And I think you're 100% right, where they need to handle it correctly and have those young guys, Morant, Jackson, and even Clark to some degree, play well together, where they might be attractive to maybe, I don't want to say off-brand, but maybe the B-tier free agents that are going to be available, because there aren't a lot of sexy a lot of sexy free agents coming into the 2020 summer anyway. So I think they just want to position themselves for next year and the future as well, too, with the young talent that they currently have on their roster.
All right, so now that we've kind of aired that aspect out of it, what of this team, Shaw, I guess really impresses you more than anything? I think really what impresses me about this team is, one, they're a top 10 team as far as scoring the basketball, right? They're not what we always remember them, where they have to play ugly. There's a little nuance to Jenkins' offense and the way that he has Morant working through. And, I don't even know whether or not we've completely seen the best of, the players that are currently constructed for this team. They're collectively scoring, but there isn't per se this dominant aura with every single one of the players that are on this team. Each one does something really, really well collectively together. It puts them in positions to win basketball games, right? Because when I look at this team, if you were to tell me, Shaw, okay, this team is second in the league in assists, right? There's nothing about this team, with maybe the exception of Ja Morant, that gives you this perception that their ball distribution has put them in such a way that they can, that collectively as a team are better than, the Milwaukee Bucks. They're better than, the Toronto Raptors, better than the Philadelphia 76ers, right? You know what I'm saying? There's nothing about them when you look at them individually, then put them together to say they are really good so far in doing something like that. They're really good where they're scoring the basketball all over the place like that. But that's what they're doing. So I'm just curious from you, Shaw, what exactly about this team really impresses you so far this year that gives you hope that everything that they're doing is on an upward tick and it's not, being overblown, they're being overhyped?
Well, I think that's a great point that you made, with their ball distribution, especially when you look at the roster construction. Morant is obviously the top assist guy, but I think there's certain things there that strike me in terms of even the stability of what they're doing. And I'm glad you even mentioned, their coach, Taylor Jenkins. I think you could ask 95% of NBA fans and they wouldn't know who the Memphis Grizzlies coach is this year, and show them a picture and then be even more stupefied. I have no idea who this dude is. So I think all of that plays into, what's happening. But one of the things that, I said earlier in the year and our homeboy Jabari, kind of had some banter, not even banter, we just had some conversation on Twitter about it. It was listen, once they learn how to finish games, they're going to be a pretty good team. And they started to be very competitive. And now in this most recent stretch in the last week and a half, they're closing out games. They went out and lambasted the Clippers a week or so ago, just beat them down. But now more than anything else, they're closing out games. And that is not something that a young team traditionally learns how to do, especially when they're first getting together. But a lot of this, I talk about it all the time on our show, but the chemistry is really, really true and apparent Ja and Jaren Jackson, they genuinely seem to really like each other on and off the floor, and it's starting to pay some dividends. I don't know if I touched on it already. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm excited about this team in some aspect. And Valanciunas, just knowing now that he's not on the trade block. His situation in Toronto was so tenuous where it was like, we didn't really know. And then he'd sit all of these fourth quarters and didn't play. And he'd play big minutes and get, crazy rebounding stats and then wouldn't play again, in fourth quarters and, 18 minutes a game sometimes. But now he knows he has a legitimate starting spot. He is a guy, he can play alongside Jaren Jackson, who actually likes to be on the outside a little bit more than maybe even I would like him to be. And Valanciunas seems to be happy. And once you have guys happy, accepting, and knowing that they don't have to worry about anything, that can start to play in a positive manner for them. In addition to getting the Brandon Clarks to be Kyle Anderson, who they wanted to have a bigger role in years past. Now he has to take a step back because there's better talent on the roster, and he's more suited for the role that they have him playing. So I think for me, Jenkins and what he's done overall probably is not getting enough credit. They're still some 5-6 games under 500. And again, it could very well be 8 as it could be 12 or 13. But I think we're starting to see the signs here that Memphis is building in the right path.
I have a really interesting question to ask you as we're kind of winding down, and we're going to tie all of this, what we've been talking about with these two teams together. But I'm really curious to ask you, who would you rather see Chris Paul work with? If we took him from OKC for a moment, right? Would you still want to see him working with Shea and with Dennis, or would you fancy him working with Ja and Dylan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think he probably pays the most dividends where he's at right now. And, even as you mentioned that, I have to, in some ways, maybe even double down on what I said earlier. All I'm talking about is Chris Paul's impact right now on SGA. I haven't even thought about what it is for Dennis Schroeder, who's now playing his best season as well, too. And I think where he's at, right now, having those two guys, especially Shea being a kind of a combo guard, really. So a guy who can really score it, but at sometimes can handle some of the playmaking responsibilities. Where Ja is probably it's obviously more electric than Chris Paul ever was, and more athletic. I think he's perfect where he's at right now, in that situation. While, Ja would love to have, and I'm sure, they have a kinship and relationship that they'll probably form even in off seasons, and maybe something that we don't even know about right now as well, too. But I think he's perfect where he is in OKC, especially for what they're trying to do right now. But that's a great question.
Yeah, I see what Chris Paul had his resounding effect that he has on Shea and he has on Dennis. It just has me eager to think, well, what if Chris Paul were to have an effect on a guy like Ja and his cohort, Dylan Brooks? I think his impact will probably be more on Dylan than I do think Ja. I think Ja has a little Paul in him. He just isn't built like Paul, but it would be an interesting dynamic. I will say, though, that the Memphis Grizzlies are definitely getting that from Jay Crowder already. I can't quite explain to you how Jay Crowder mirrors what Zach Randolph's impact was, back when the Memphis Grizzlies made the move to bring him onto that roster. Jay Crowder has that kind of impact, man. He mirrors a little bit. He has like that bulldog. I don't know why I'm tripping on bulldogs this week, but he has a bulldog-like mentality. He's such a workhorse, and he takes no ish from no one type of player. And I think part of that element has been what's missing when we talk about young guys coming into this league trying to establish and put footing into the game. They have all of the skill set, but once someone elbows them in the jaw, once someone, kind of, pushes their chest in a little bit, they somehow fold. They don't seem to return with the same resonance and eagerness of wanting to still want to be a part of this thing. And I think playing next to guys like Jay Crowder, who don't take no crap from no one, who basically came from nothing, who was never given anything that the NBA has put out in front of his feet. That kind of thing, I think, humbles some of these young players to recognize that even if you get drafted, all that basically means is a window. What blows in and out of that window depends on how you protect your house. And Jay Crowder is always about protecting his house. Guy like Jonas Valanciunas, he is like the opposite of that. And I think he recognizes that there are not that many teams that are going to continue to roll the dice with a player like him. He rolls next to a guy like Crowder. There's credibility in the way that he plays the game as a center. All of these things I think make sense. And how Taylor Jenkins, finagles and utilizes that as he continues to build up the Jaren Jacksons, the Dylan Brooks, and the Ja Morants. You know what I'm saying? The Anthony Meltons, the Brandon Clarks of that roster. All of that, I think, now is starting to play a little bit better, so that we can actually start putting a face to their game. And that, to me, I think, is what's important about recognizing where the Memphis Grizzlies can easily transition. Again, this could be, they could be overhyped. They really could be overhyped because there are some down teams in the Western Conference. But I can't be down on them too much when they're going out there and they're taking care of business and they're winning more basketball games than we predicted them losing.
Yeah. And I'll close out and just saying that, two quick points is, they're smart in terms of how they've structured their roster right now. And they have all these guys coming up the book, Solomon Hill, Crowder himself, even Josh Jackson, who they traded for, in that deal, Kabakalo, Dylan Brooks, all those guys off the books next year. And they'll only have $50-something million in committed salary. So they can be aggressive. They can be a team, if they want to, where they take on and absorb some bad contracts and salary, especially for the next season, if it returns them some assets in return, which I'm sure would be a great thing. We all like it what Brooklyn did a few years ago, where they're like, hey, whatever, give us your bad deal so that we can get some picks. I think Memphis can be in this position to do that if they decided that they didn't necessarily want to try to be a competitive team and go for an 8 seed right now this year. And I think they do have some options with this. But the final thing I'll say is, like, wouldn't it be absolutely insane, and this is going to be almost conspiracy-esque, if you will, but this team continues to fight for a playoff spot, and Iguodala says, all right, bump it. let me on the roster. Let me see, what I can do. And if he were to play this year out, so to speak, because again, he's another expiring deal, would he play this year out with this Memphis team that is, young and be another veteran guy who can be around the team? I think that's very far-fetched, but wouldn't that be something else, if Memphis were able to turn that situation around? I still feel like they're better off turning him into assets if possible, but, that'd be something to consider as well, too, bro.
Well, and again, part of what I've been trying to say, though, Shaw, is if Andre Iguodala has expressed his desire to play, you ought to find a way to play him. Don't let the politics of what's going on detract you from the impact a guy like Iguodala would like to have on the game of basketball. Even if his agenda is a hidden agenda, he is a quality basketball player. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're really trying to have this conversation about the Memphis Grizzlies, this team defensively is not a good team defensively, Shaw. They're scoring the basketball a hell of a lot better, but they're also allowing like 116 points per game, right? Which is like damn near to the bottom of the league. So any player that you have in there, and let's remember, Andre Iguodala is a former Finals MVP, not because he jacked up and scored a bunch of points when he was with the Golden State Warriors, because he was the best two-way defender, right, against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Even when they had Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala was the better defender against LeBron James. So my whole thing is, Andre Iguodala can definitely show some of these players what it's like to be a two-way player, what it's like when your offensive game isn't clicking, that you still have to do the other necessary things to be relevant if you're wanting this team to be successful. Now, again, he hasn't made any assertions that he wants to play for this basketball team. And I think that's more organizational than it is really about the guys that he's playing in the locker room with, right? But I will say that if that time comes, I think Andre Iguodala has earned enough credibility, not just as an NBA champion, but as a player and a class personified type of presence, that if he says, I do want to play, I want to have an impact on some of these young guys while you guys sort out what you want to do with me, I think that if you're Jenkins, you should really consider that possibility, because it will only help the situation. He can't poison these guys. Most of these guys that you're really worried about are under lock and key. So he's not going to adversely influence the players that you currently have. And so I would hope that if the Memphis Grizzlies are weighing these things, and this is some of the things that is on the table, that they seriously take a look at that. Because even for the window that you do choose to keep Andre Iguodala, he will certainly help this basketball team be better defensively than what we are still currently seeing, no matter how impressive they are and have been playing so far this season.
All right, well, I want to hear what the fans have to say. Your thoughts on
Can't be much, man, because we done talked them out. I tell you right now, we had a lot of things that we were bringing to the table on this. So
for sure. But I mean, as always, let our fans, listeners, let us know what you have to think about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Should they stand pat? Should they still try to move these guys out, move them off into greener pastures? What about the Memphis Grizzlies? Should they keep Iguodala? Should they try to trade him? What should they do? You know, how deep do you think these two teams can get throughout the regular season, and can they make legitimate and stabilized runs here in the playoffs in the Western Conference? So we want to hear from you, man. Great topics here, man. I can't wait to jump into next week's topics. I'm sure we're going to keep it going with this type of fervor and energy. But anyway, we got more show to discuss here, brother. So
without question, we made the Thunder roll, and we brought a little bit of the Grizz with no fizz. Your turn to the baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was the breakdown.
Coast to coast.
Time to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
Thomas Bryant, Pascal Siakam, Norman Powell, and Kyrie Irving. What do they all have in common? They're back, and they're back with their respective teams. Are we feeling like the NBA is now working, fully running on all cylinders, Shaw?
Well, not quite, but thankfully, you know, some of these guys, and some of those are big hitters, especially Kyrie and Pascal for their respective teams. Brooklyn's been struggling without Kyrie in recent weeks here, so they definitely needed him back. Toronto somehow has been able to stay afloat without Siakam, but getting him and Powell, and I heard even this all might be on the way back soon as well, too. Good news for them. Thomas Bryant back from Washington is huge, as well as Bradley Beal made his return from 3-game absence. Davis Bertans also back. So we are starting to see some guys get a little bit healthier, but those are the main highlights, you know, for this week, bro.
All right, and speaking of back, Durant is back with his Twitter fingers. And of course, you know Durant, man, he got to burn somebody. Not his phone, but he's got to burn somebody with his Twitter account. And seems like Kendrick Perkins are in his crosshairs. What's up with the Perkins and Durant beef?
I'm sure lots of people were following this on Twitter over the course of the week. I actually had to catch up on it the day after it happened, and I just had to laugh, man. You know, Perk calling him out for joining the team, and KD talking about Perk can only average 2 points a game, and he was a weak center on their roster. So former teammates now turned, you know, social media enemies, I guess. We'll see how this plays, if it plays out and goes any further. But overall, man, some entertaining stuff, as always, it's in the NBA Twitterverse.
SMEs, you know, in our world, that's subject matter expert. But social media enemies sounds about right. That's the new acronym in the NBA whenever someone is labeled as an SME. Slugs to thugs, man. The whole situation with Coach Beilein and the Cavs seems to be an unfortunate circumstance situation. Albeit, though, they seem to be all good because the Cavs went out and busted the Nuggets behind at the expense of all of this controversy.
Hey, man, maybe it's one of those breakups to makeup situation. He had to tear him down and make some mistakes and have to eat some humble pie himself, make all types of apologies. Kobe Altman had to get involved and poll the roster and make sure they understood that it was a slip up and not something that he really genuinely thought about his team. And now they're doing a little bit better. Tristan Thompson ended up having a career high, you know, I think the game after that. And, you know, they're showering him with champagne as if they just won the NBA championship. So they're finding anything they can possibly hold on to be positive in Cleveland until Kevin Love and Tristan or whoever else potentially gets moved on. But Coach Beilein out here doing the most, but at least it's starting to work out for them a little bit here.
It's funny you said breakups to makeups, man. And the first thing I thought about Coach Beilein growing up hip hop. Who knew? Finally, Shaw out in Detroit. Blake Griffin, he decides to opt for surgery on his left knee, which essentially means that he's gone again for the rest of the season. Can the Detroit Pistons finally move on from Blake Griffin?
I don't think they'll be able to. Contract still has 2 or 3 years left on that deal. So as we've alluded to, Drummond is a guy who they've been having conversations with. There's also a lot of interest in Luke Kennard out there. There's interest in Derrick Rose. I do think we're going to see the end of this current iteration of the Pistons team. But Blake is going to rehab, and hopefully he'll be back next year. And, probably playing with a whole bunch of new teammates on the Detroit roster.
All right. Well, this has been an awesome show, to say the least, Shaw. Great content, conversation about the Thunder and the Memphis Grizzlies. And it's always good to kind of poke at a couple of the crazy things happening in our segment of the Coast to Coast.
You know it, man. And I hope our friends and listeners did enjoy it as well. I love doing the show with you, bro. And, love the content that we bring on a week-to-week basis. And can't wait to see what we have up our sleeves next week, bro.
All right. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board for the Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.